Greetings, Quester. The Meddlesome Meeples present Tome Talk with Matt and Richard.
Welcome to Tome Talk, and this week Matt is going to talk about one of the City Watch books from Terry Pratchett, Guards.
That's right. Now, this is the first in the City Watch series. There's a set of 8 books in this set, isn't there?
I've never counted them, actually.
Starting with Guards and ending with Snuff.
Yes.
And this one was actually, the first book was released in 1989. Now, it's the first book of the City Watch books.
Which used to be a trilogy.
Yeah. Hence this handy-sized omnibus.
So now it's octilogy or something.
But it's not the first book of the Discworld series.
Yeah, which one is it? That the 5th or 6th or what? Oh, yeah.
I think it's something like the 8th, 7th, 8th, something like that. I'm not sure exactly.
Mort was the 4th, and then Sorcery with. Then it was Witches Abroad. So yeah.
Yeah, but you don't need to have been familiar with any of the other Discworld books.
They don't
to get
exactly
to this.
follow one, do they?
No, they're not. As long as you follow the Watch books in order, and this is the first one, then that's fine. Now, I would say actually this is quite different from, or the City Watch books as a set are quite different from the other Discworld books.
Yes, they are.
Because they have a lot more plot structure than the other Discworld novels. Because especially the early ones, are quite crazy and they're all over the place, aren't they? I mean, they're good.
The early ones are more adventures, aren't they? I mean, it's like that the normal the ones before were like Star Trek original series.
Yeah.
And the City Watch is like DS9. Yeah. So all in one place, and you can actually get to know the characters, follow it. Yeah. That's how I see it anyway.
That's a fairly good analogy. I mean,
pretty nerdy though.
I mean, if you're not familiar with the Discworld books, they are in a fantasy setting, but they're not traditional fantasy books because they are more comic in nature.
It's like
they're
parody.
Very much I mean, Terry Pratchett said with regards to the City Watch books and Guards that his idea for this was based on the fact that in normal fantasy books, the hero or one of the other characters basically goes into a city, and you have these guards that are basically just there to be cut down by,
They're just popping up the doorframe until it's time for them to get cut down.
So, and this was meant to be looking at those guys that we usually see get cut down or as a backdrop to the story. This is their story.
No one ever thinks about the henchmen.
But it's kind of like a procedural story set in a fantasy setting. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting because in the first book, the Watch has only got the four members. 3 at the start because you've got the one of them has just died, and part of the story of Guards is that the new member goes in, brings them back up to the strength of 4, and changes the Watch around them.
So the new one is Carrot,
New one's Corporal Carrot.
This is the first time I've had any crossover.
Corporal Carrot. Yeah.
Now, I have read this book as well, but a very long time ago. But it's strange because it's the first time in Tome Talk that it's one that we've both read, I think.
Yeah, quite possibly so. Yeah. And but in this, you've got Captain. I mean, obviously we don't want to go into spoilers, but you've got Captain Vimes, who is quite like the cynical cop, still quite sharp, but he's been in the Watch from being a young lad, and he's seen the Watch basically dismantled around him. Seen the guilds of like the Thieves Guild, etc., the Assassins Guild come up, and that's basically made him feel, what's the point of us? Because the way that the patrician of the city, Lord Vetinari, has kept the guilds, has kept crime and other things in line, is by scaling back the guards and giving like authority to the various
thieves and things. Yeah. So they police themselves.
They police themselves, but they maintain like a quota, and basically any unlicensed thieving is dealt with fairly brutally by the Thieves Guild, which helps maintain that quota. So there's less need, in theory, for the guards. So he's seen all that, and he's become quite cynical a drunkard a lot of the time, but he's still quite sharp in and of himself when he's sober.
The bit I remember most about it is the Clutchy and coffee. That's in that one, isn't it?
Because it has to bring him back to sobriety.
It goes the other way, doesn't it? It's like you become too sober. Yeah, I think that was a good bit.
So he's one of the four main characters. Then you've got Sergeant Colon, who is quite a fat, lazy, incompetent so-and-so. He's described as in the book.
He's a classic sergeant, isn't he?
Yeah.
But, not that they're fat and lazy. It's that he feels that he's very important, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he has a lot of he's got a lot of confidence, but it's not very well founded.
It's kind of funny because I read a lot of historical fiction, and in a lot of them, the sergeants are absolutely brilliant, and the officers wouldn't get by without the sergeants. So, for example, Sharp is a good example of that.
Yeah.
But in this, it's very much the other extreme of sergeants, where actually the watch would probably function a lot better if it wasn't for Sergeant Colon. And then you've got Corporal Nobby Nobbs, haven't you, who is just an absolute crooked little thief.
Yeah, well, they need someone for Colon to be the sergeant of, don't they? Yeah.
And then, of course, you've got Carrot coming in, who's he's honest, he's idealistic. By the time he starts, he's reading the laws and ordinances of Ankh-Morpork and following them to the letter.
Yeah, he's going by the book, isn't he?
Yeah. But he's got such a nice way about him with people that somehow it works.
Yeah.
One quote that I read about him was quite interesting because it talked about how his policing style is quite reminiscent of like the traditional idealised portrayals of like the British Bobby.
Right, he's a Bobby.
Sort of the friendly guy walking down the street saying hello to people, who knows everybody in the neighbourhood. That sort of...
Yeah, because he does learn everybody's names, doesn't he? Like, pretty much in the whole city.
That's one of the things that quite early on, I think, it mentions that Vimes says, I've lived here all my life, you've been here 5 minutes and everybody knows who you are. Sort of But it's a really interesting story here as well. Now, the story itself is very much a fantasy-based story, in the sense that there's a dragon.
Yeah, it's more fantasy than most of the City Watch books, isn't it? It kind of kicks off with a more fantasy version.
And then in later books it goes more to...
it's more about the people.
Yeah.
It's always the
a more out-and-out, straightforward crime story.
Yeah.
Like murders and things that they're trying to solve. And it also, in later books, moves more into a story... There's still all that there, but the family element becomes stronger. So you've got one of the characters, and we won't say who for the sake of spoilers, but one of the characters in later books has a family, and that becomes more and more of a predominant theme, that he's trying to juggle his family responsibilities while dealing with the responsibilities of being the watchman and an officer. And that makes it for a different feel, but I still loved all of those books.
Well, it has to advance, doesn't it? I mean, you can't have them being the same.
So, and it's an interesting progression for that character, and for all of the characters, and they expand, so you've got more than just the 4 characters in the story. But this is the only one of the books where it is just that traditional 4.
They end up having like a representative of most of the species on Discord, don't they? So that nobody feels like they aren't represented in the watch. For like the PR of being able to police, and it ends up being very much about kind of the red tape and stuff, and trying to balance keeping the peace with keeping all the ordinances like Carrot would be into, and like having different initiatives in the watch. It's so much about like basically policing, isn't it?
One of the things, this isn't just really a spoiler because you find this out very early on in the book. The backdrop for all of this is that there's this group called the Unique and Supreme Lodge of the Elucidated Brethren of the Ebon Knight, because there's lots of secret societies in Ankh-Morpork.
Did you write that down?
I had to write that down, so I got it right.
Okay.
I cheated, but there was reasons. The Unique and Supreme Lodge of the Elucidated Brethren of the Ebon Knight.
Now, the main bit I remember about that is the doorman.
Yeah,
they're trying to get in at the door and get the password. And that's a great scene.
Quite a funny one, and that's right at the beginning of the book, isn't it? But this group has been set up by the Supreme Grand Master of the group, and he is basically using them to summon a dragon into the city, so that the people will need a hero to slay the dragon, send the dragon away, and then he can make that person the king and control him.
Yeah, don't do too much more about that.
No, we're not saying any more.
But it's fun to work out while you're reading it.
Yeah, I think you get that from the plot, right at the beginning of the story, that's what his goal is ultimately.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's quite fun to see how he develops that plot and that scheme.
Yeah.
And how that works out for him in the end is very good as well.
The other great bit about in this book is the stuff about the 1,000,000 to 1 chance.
Yeah.
It's like if it's something
it's
1,000,000 to 1 chance,
but it just might work.
And you have to actually say it, and you have to make sure it is 1,000,000 to 1 chance, otherwise it won't work.
Yeah.
And so they end up trying to make things more difficult for themselves, don't they? So it's a 1,000,000 to 1 chance.
Yeah.
That was a great bit.
That's fantastic in there. But the characters themselves are brilliant. I mean, Kara and Vimes particularly are really, really good, and I'd love to see these characters portrayed as a TV series, which I know there were plans at one point to do, but seems to have fallen by the wayside. And same for Nobby and Colon, because I think just the dialogue of them on patrol and their interactions with one another, particularly because Colon has got this idea of him being the wiser, the more intelligent one of the two. But whenever you actually read through the comments, it's quite obvious that Nobby's got more about him than Colon.
Yeah, Nobby's quite streetwise, isn't he, really?
Yeah.
Just kind of gets on with stuff, but he's always stealing things while he's doing it.
So they are, very good characters. And the story itself is good. I would say if you like comedy in your books, then the Discworld is great. I do know some people who have picked up Discworld books before because they liked fantasy, started reading it and actually didn't enjoy it because they were expecting it to be a more serious fantasy book, and it wasn't. So
you also have to like jokes.
Yeah, you do have to like reading jokes.
I think you have to like jokes more than you like fantasy, really.
Yeah, I mean, I love fantasy. I don't tend to read many comedies because I prefer to watch comedy usually. But I love the way that Pratchett winds his humour throughout and the little plays on words that he does.
Well, I enjoy Discworld books, but not much of the fantasy. So, yeah, for me it's the. But I do kind of. It's not for me. It's not just the jokes; they're great stories as well.
Yeah,
but I just like all the characters.
And more so, I think for me in the City Watch, because I've read all of the Discworld books and I enjoyed all of the Discworld books, but I felt with this there was more story to it. So although the humour was sort of scaled back slightly to accommodate the fact there was more plot structure, it was still
grim murders as well.
Yeah,
that's the thing.
It was still really funny and it still made me laugh. So.
I think it's not as zany as the early books, but
no.
Later on, all of them seem to have very strong story elements to them. That's what I found anyway.
I enjoyed the early books, but I did find that they were too zany. So you'd get like entire passages, and you knew that the reason for those passages was just to make a joke at the end.
Yeah, you did.
And as a result, the plot sort of suffered for that.
I think it was only the first two, for me, that were like that. Rincewind's initial kind of journeys around the Discworld.
Rincewind's journeys were just insane in the early books.
They were crazy. And I liked his later ones, like when he went to 4X. The one that was really good. And the Aegean continent. That was quite scary. But yeah, it was good though. Yeah.
The thing that I really loved about the early books was Two Flowers luggage. The luggage was great, but yeah. So this is one I'm thoroughly recommending if you like fantasy and if you like comedy. I think even you wouldn't really need to enjoy normal sort of police procedural stories to enjoy this because
but we're in the UK.
Just fun.
Everybody loves mystery.
Well, yeah, that is true. So yeah, I really enjoyed this. This is one of my favourites. It's been adapted quite nicely in times as well. There's a very good BBC radio drama, and I
don't get good ones of them every day.
No, and I really like the audiobooks for these as well.
Is it Tony Robinson doing it? Or is that a different one?
No, that's a different one, I think. But I tend to get the audiobooks for the series and listen to all 8 books on audiobooks once a year.
I do that with the Science of the Discworld ones. There's 4 of them. And they also feature some of the same characters, the luggage especially, because you can send into any dimension, so and you can collect samples. So there you go. But Matt recommends this book, and as a one-time thing, I also recommend it as well. So both of us can this time.
Is that allowed?
I'm doing it. We write the rules on this.
But it's our podcast. We can do it what we want.
Yeah. So 2 recommendations for Guards by Terry Pratchett.
Incidentally, there's not one of the books in the in that set of 8 books that I didn't like. I'll say that now. I probably won't talk about another one at a later time, but there's not a book in there that I didn't enjoy. And they are different. They are different enough one to another that you never feel like it's a rehash of the earlier stories. So it's thoroughly recommended.
Yeah.
Farewell, Quester. To find out about other productions by the Meddlesome Meeples, then check out our channel or rendezvous with us at meddlesomemeeples.com. Until next time, Quester, farewell and keep thine axe sharp.